Welcome back. Today I am going to be going over a Zastava M70. This is a ZPAP. It is a new manufactured AK clone that is originally manufactured in Serbia, imported into the United States, and then gone through the 922R compliance in order to make it legal for regular civilian sale. What I've got on top of it is an MD25 by Primary Arms. It is a non-magnified red dot with their ACSS reticle, so it's got a regular chevron at the top and a couple of bullet drop compensated dots underneath it. I wish I would have some kind of a provision to put a magnifier on it, but I do not at this point. It is actually held on in place by a Midwest Industries Gen 2 Yugo style clamp mount that goes on to the scope rail on the side of the ZPAP here by Zastava. Loaded up, I'm going to be shooting Bellum ammo at 123 grain projectile, full metal jacket. It's going to be 5 rounds with my 5-round magazine. Now, which is common with any AK, there is no last round bolt hold open. As I mentioned, it's a 5-round magazine. Now, this does have a Krebs custom safety that I installed on it aftermarket. It is nice. It does have a bolt hold open here, which is engaged by the safety. And then, of course, when it's in the safe position, it's got a swell on the bottom of it so you can manipulate it with your firing hand without having to do any weird reachovers. That is the only alteration I did make to this firearm, is by putting that Krebs custom safety on it. Everything else is still stock on it. I have not changed out the trigger on it. It is the factory trigger that would have came from Zastava. They actually chose to use wood furniture, and I believe there are some other US manufactured components that they use, so that way they did not have to mess with any of the internals of the firearm. It is the same semi-automatic trigger that would have been standard in from Serbia, from Zastava, and then it is the same bolt carrier group, bolt, everything there is all their system. They actually have that set up so all of their hardnesses and stuff between the hammer and the firing pin and the back of the bolt carrier and the back of the bolt is all going to match up, so you don't have to worry about any dissimilar hardnesses or kind of steels going from aftermarket triggers into aftermarket bolts, aftermarket carriers. They kept it all with the original configuration, so that way they don't have as many issues as what you might have with different AKs that are on the market. As I mentioned, that was 5 rounds of Bellum. Next, I'm going to switch over to my Springfield Saint so we can kind of do a comparison between it and the AK for recoil. Now, of course, this has got a non-magnified red dot, and my Saint has a 1 to 10 LPVO on it. So I'll get everything set back up, and we'll come back to that next. We are back. I have 5 rounds of M855 green tip ammunition. This is manufactured by Winchester. This would be a rough comparison to what a standard military round's going to be. So that way it'll be more of a apples to apples comparison with a full metal jacket Bellum to a FMJ here for the green tip. There we go. Magazine didn't want a seat. 5 rounds, and of course the AR does offer a last round bolt hole bin, of course, which anybody that uses any of the AR pattern rifles will be familiar with that. Next, we'll go down and take a look at the target and see what we have for differences. Of course, as I mentioned, this has got an LPVO, a magnified optic, where the red dot is just going to be what's on my AK for right now, my Zastava. Maybe someday in the future I'll put like a 1:6 on it or something like that, but for right now that's all I really do with it, because there's not really a lot of modification you can do to them in order to kind of upgrade them like you can the AR. Okay, so as you can see, the 855, I should say, is holding a little, probably under a 2-inch group here at 100 yards. That is not bad for 855. The Bellum ammo here, I mean, it's got probably about a 1/6 spread on it, but you figure you're using a non-magnified dot. I was trying to hold in this general area, so even that area, that whole chevron is covering up the entire area. You can't really see. That's why I kind of wish Midwest Industries would have gave a provision on their side mount system that they had there in order to incorporate a flip-off magnifier to sit behind what the red dot is. I think that would be quite popular with the AK crowd. Now, as I mentioned, that was my 855. It's still shooting a little bit off to the right-hand side here with that AK, so I should actually do some alterations on my target, not my target, but my optic there, and do a better job of sighting in my AK for now. But that's kind of a brief little difference between the two rifles. Now I'll kind of go over a little bit more of the two in a little bit more detail. First up, I'm going to be going over the Zastava M70. This is a ZPAP model. I've got a sling on it that I purchased from Amazon. It's just a basic, I'm assuming a Chinese manufactured sling. And I also put a rubber recoil pad on it. Now, the whole reason I put the recoil pad on was for shouldering. The metal butt pad that comes on these from factory are incredibly slip, and it makes it very complicated in order to keep a good shoulder weld. So I put the little recoil pad on there, give it a little bit of an extension as well. Now, as I mentioned, this is a ACSS model sight by Primary Arms. It's an MD25, so it'll be one of their little bit older variants. Now, going back from that, I've got that in place on a direct mount that goes on the side rail on the side of the M70. This optic mounts directly to the rail. It does not use a Picatinny interface. The MD25 is the same footprint as a T1, T2 Micro by Aimpoint, so it is nice that it actually has it low enough that when you go to co-witness, you actually have the sight still in the very lower section of the window of the optic. Now, the furniture on this is American walnut that has a polyurethane stain on both the forend and butt pistol grip, I should say, but it does not appear as though if they did HS or polyurethane the buttstock. Doesn't look like it's that prevalent. It is kind of wearing off on the one side, but I do like the fact that it has a walnut furniture set on it. That is the primary model reason, I should say, as to why I purchased this one. Now, as I mentioned, it's got the Krebs custom safety. I'll get rid of this little 5-round magazine. I'm not even sure where I even got this magazine at. It was something that I had from another Yugo rifle, the M72. That is the RPK version. That one I'll maybe get out here maybe next week if it's not terribly cold yet. But from there, it's got a clear finish that is on the bolt carrier group on it. Regular AK style takedown. With the scope mount on does make it complicated to do a full field strip on it, because the scope mount will sit in where this cross pin that holds the the detent back here for disassembling the firearm. Until right now, I didn't even realize that was impacting to be able to take it down. So the actual lever does come off here. It is held in place by a secondary push system here, but it's so tight to make it robust and rigid so that way it doesn't move. And that might actually be one of the issues as to why my optic isn't sighted in as to where it was originally, because before I came out and shot this, I noticed that there was a little bit of play. So there's a nut on the side here. When this is loose, you can push the entire mechanism up and actually rotate that in and out in order to adjust the tension on your rail on the side. I actually put it in one more, just one little flat rotation, so it wasn't even probably an eighth of a turn in, and that made it even more robust, and there's no play on that mount now. Now the barrel on this AK on a M70 is a little bit heavier profile than what the rest of the AKs are for like your Romanians, even like the Arsenals, anything that's running off that milled receiver. This is just a regular stamped sheet metal receiver, but there is a bulged trunnion to actually make more surface for metal that's going to go around that barrel when they basically stake it in place once they go to assemble it. The front and rear sight are actually at the 12 o'clock as opposed to some of your cheaper AKs. You'll see them at probably like an 11 o'clock with a slight cant, but that was one of the big claims that Zastava makes, is they make sure that all of their rifles, when they come in from Serbia, that they check to make sure everything is clocked correctly before they actually go any further with that firearm. Now the sling is held on in the front by a system that is part of the gas block for the rifle that's on the barrel. So that's actually like a little clip that's held in, which I don't know if you can see that. But I thought that was part of the barrel profile. Turns out when they actually go to slide all this stuff on, that's held in place by a kind of like a clamp system that holds onto that. It gives a little bit of movement on it, but not much. And then of course, it's just a basic their style of front sight. Now some of the older M70 imports that were brought in by Century Arms, this of course has nothing to do with Century. This is a Zastava started building these things on 922 compliance here in the US. So this front sight will not have any provision for a flip up, it's a glow in the dark sight. It's not tritium, it's more like a phosphorescent flip up piece, and then another piece that flips up on the rear, so they omit all of that. You've got nice bright markings here in meters for your rear sight. So you've got, I've got it set on 100. I did do some shooting previously with it at 100 yards before I went on to that. And then of course it's got the traditional slant muzzle brake on there, rotated off to the right hand side. So if you're doing any like fast firing, it'll help to prevent the rifle from walking up and to the right. But that is pretty well standard on this. It is of course a double stack magazine well on it, so you can use any AK magazines. Coming up next, I'm going to be using a Magpul, one of their, I believe it's a Gen 3 magazine in it. But then going from there is my Springfield Saint, if I don't lose the Zastava off the table. Now on top of the Springfield, my Saint here, I have a 1:10 Citadel by Sightmark. I've been actually running this optic for quite a while, pretty much since I bought the Saint. I've done a lot of heavy modifications to this Saint. This was originally one of the first releases of the Saint that had the BCM buttstock on it, pistol grip. It had a special BCM forend on it, and it had a fixed A-frame front sight. The first modification I made was I replaced that handguard that was originally on it with an actual BCM KMR rail at a 9-inch length to incorporate the original A-frame front sight. Well, after running that with a magnified optic like an LPVO, I got rid of the front sight, went to a Precision Reflex Incorporated, if I can get it up here, flip up front sight with the HK style hood. Now I've got my, I believe they're BCM rail covers as well in a wolf gray. Coming back from there, I have my scope sitting in a LaRue 725 or 745. I think it's a 745 20 MOA offset system. This was a mount I had laying around that was a 30mm, so that's why I'm using that on a scope that is roughly about the same price as what the mount cost. After that, I've got a rail system up here by Ergo. This is one of their UMP rails. I forget what that actually stands for, but that gives me a Picatinny rail that sits out past the front sight. Now this allows me to use any kind of a Picatinny style bipod on this and still have some interface back here if I have the bipod on it, so you still have some rail room. I've got a ProTac Streamlight on this rifle, and I've got it set up with a pressure pad. Going back from there, I've got a Magpul oversized magazine release with a CMMG ambidextrous release on the opposite side, still maintaining the slide release that was, well, I should say bolt release that was originally on there. Now on the other side, I mentioned the Magpul oversized release. I've got a Radian Raptor safety put on this, so I actually have it set up in a 45 degree with a small lever on the one side and a larger lever on the other. I also have a Veltor Mod 3, I believe, charging handle, which gives me a little bit bigger charging handle on this side. It is not an ambidextrous. I'm still running the original factory Springfield gut, so it does have the Springfield bolt in there, and it is running a standard H2, I believe. Let me check that quick. Nope, just a regular H buffer in there. Mid-length gas system on it, and it is running a standard carbine buffer tube back here. This is one of my only ARs that I did not convert over into the A5 system. Veltor ran out of buffer tubes, so as soon as Veltor gets those back in stock, I will be switching this over to the A5. And then I've got a Magpul Myad grip on there and a B5 buttstock. So I have done a lot of changing out of this. The most important thing to change out is the nickel boron coated trigger system. This is actually running a Geisley single stage precision with a flat bow. So the vast majority of all my ARs, I've got Geisleys in them. That is probably one of the best and first upgrades to any AR you should do to it. That's going to be a overview of this rifle here by Springfield Armory. One thing I should mention, the AK, the Zastava, this is going to have a chrome-lined hammer-forged barrel on it, where I'm not even sure what the twist rate is on the 7.62x3.9. The 5.56 Saint here has got a 1-in-8 melanited. Couldn't even tell you what the actual grade of steel, if it's a 4140, 4150, one of those two, chromoly vanadium. All they've got the barrel stamped with is 5.56 NATO, 1-in-8, so they don't even really tell you that much more. You can, of course, go to Springfield's website and they will give you the rundown on all of the specifications of what the barrel is. So that'll kind of go from there. It doesn't have it marked with magnetical particle inspected or high pressure tested. And they don't even specify on the carrier if it is magnetic particle inspected or high pressure. Another upgrade I do on all of my bolts is I go away from the regular cotter pin and put in a full flat pin that goes in there that actually isn't a cotter key. It's a solid pin with just a little bit of a flange on the outside of it. And all of my gas rings, which it's a little bit harder to get out of it, I've got McFarlane gas rings in here as opposed to the 3 separate ones. It's a coil ring that goes around there to replace your gas rings. I like those a little bit better than the 3 gas rings. Okay, so that'll be everything that is what makes up my Springfield and the few modifications I did to my M70 Zastava. Okay, I got 10 rounds of AAC 75 grain boat tail hollow point. It's a 75 grain round that is manufactured by Hornady, loaded up by AAC. It's got a suggested muzzle velocity of 2,700 feet per second. I'm going to go ahead and shoot 10 rounds of it out of the Saint. See what kind of a group we get. It is 10 rounds of 75 grain boat tail hollow point, and at 8 power, this reticle is dancing all over the target. So I can honestly say that none of this stuff is overly stable to be shooting from, but at least it'll give me a rough idea of how the 75 grain does somewhat group out of the rifle. Obviously the rifle is capable of grouping a lot better than what I will, but load up 10 rounds of the next AAC round I have, and we'll see how that does. This round is a 75 grain as well, but this is a ballistic tip. It's one of the, I believe it's called a Saber Blade in their Saber Defense by AAC. This is still another round that is manufactured by Hornady, the actual bullet itself, for Palmetto State and the AAC brand. Okay, that'll be 10 rounds of the Saber Defense and the 75 grain Saber Blade. Now, another thing I should mention is my reticle here is the HDR reticle. What that is a fine duplex coming down on both sides with a thicker German 3 system off of the side. So you got two big thick black lines coming off the side up the bottom, and then it's got nice fine lines coming in for your primary crosshair. Now the other interesting thing is these crosshairs do not meet in the middle. There is a dot in the center of it, which the dot at 8 power almost perfectly covers the center of the blue bullseyes down there. When we go down to take a look at how I did for accuracy, I'll be sure to actually show you what this dot in the center of this reticle does cover up. I did go with that because I do not like doing any kind of bullet drop compensated reticles in these. Anything that's like specifically designed for one kind of reticle, I don't like doing that. I like to have something where it's just a basic reticle, so that way if I need to later on, I have not touched these caps in a long time, I can go up here and I can do any rough dialing. This is a ½ minute of adjustment on this reticle, so it is a little bit more of a coarse adjustment, but it's an LPVO. It was never designed for pinpoint accuracy per se, like an actual precision reticle on a precision rifle scope will be, but it has done remarkably well. I have beat the crap out of this 1 to 10 by sight mark, and I've had no issues with it holding 0. Can't wait to go down to see which one of these two shot better and then figure out which one I'm going to start going with from here. The round I've shot out of this the most is a 69 grain Frontier round by Hornady, which I can't find it anymore, so that's why I'm more interested to go with a 75 grain round, a little bit more energy on target. It's going to be a little bit of a more pronounced bullet arc as opposed to a 68, but probably not by much. I think there's only like a 50 or 70 difference for velocity between the two rounds. As I mentioned, we'll go down, take a look at the target, and kind of go from there. Next up, I'm going to be doing some little bit more closer range shooting with the M70 and a new pair of glasses I got. So it'll give you more of a first person kind of a view. Okay, this was the point of aim. I'm looking at one to about a 3-inch low group and probably about 3 inches wide at 100 yards. So, I mean, that's pretty wide group for match ammo, but that is 10 rounds and that is the barrel heating up. This would have been the 75 grain hollow point by AAC, and this is 10 rounds of the 75 grain Saber Defense. All in all, for a 8-power scope, I mean, I would expect a tighter group, but as I mentioned, right now pretty much this entire area here is what that reticle is taking up at 100 yards. So it is a fairly decent size, about would be considered a 2 MOA dot there at, going to be, well, actually no, I think it's about here. I think it's about an inch it's covering, because I think I can just see the white around there at the 100-yard mark. But it is not what I would be considering a precision reticle by any stretch of the imagination, even at 8x. This is going to be, as I mentioned, a 10-round string, and you can kind of see it like stringing with a little bit more flyers. And as I mentioned, with the way the table wobbles back and forth, I am not surprised that I have about a 2.5-inch spread there and roughly around a 3-inch spread there. So all in all, I mean, it's still not shooting horrible for like match ammo, but I mean, I haven't had a whole lot of luck shooting that 75 grain round out of a Mark 12 by Daniel Defense. So this is probably still better than what that was doing with that Mark 12. I think I'm going to try to stick with that 75 grain for both rifles, kind of do a more precise 5-round group, probably at this target there next. I do want to sight in the Zastava though, that M70, so I will be doing that next. I'm not going to do any filming on that because that's just going to be a rough sight in, but I do want to make sure I come back and adjust my zero for that 75 grain hollow point. I think I'm going to continue forward using that one. Okay, went away from the bag. I've got a UTG Recon style bipod on that little diving board I've got on the front there. It did increase the group on the 75 grain by almost an inch. So we got just not quite a 1.5 inch spread there. This will be the 75 grain Hornady by AAC. And this is the 75 grain ballistic tip by AAC. There again, probably about an 1.5 inch group. I got one flyer, otherwise this would have been probably close to an MOA. It's hard to say. I mean, this is probably about 1.75 MOA. That's probably still maybe close to a 2 MOA group. So I'd say probably the 1 in 8 twist here might not like the 75 grain rounds by AAC. Have to continue to do some more experimentation, but definitely the groups here for using a bipod off the ground are a little bit better than what they were. And The other thing to take in note is the reticle is completely covering up this entire blue circle here. So that means the best you're ever going to be able to shoot with this gun is at least 1 MOA. At 8 power, it's going to cover up 1 inch there, so you're really not going to be looking at too much more. So even being a 2-inch group there, or a little under, or around a 2-inch group there, probably still isn't bad with the issues you're going to be given with the reticle on the gun. As I mentioned, this was not a scope designed for any like precision shooting. It was more designed for a general purpose 1 to 10. So other than that, I'm still pretty happy with it. Not sure which one I'll go with, but this is definitely, after making the adjustments from here, moving it up 3 MOA, I'm still probably around a half MOA high, so I'll move it back down. But I'm thinking the 75 grain Saber Defense here, with both of these rounds are supposed to be the same velocity. With these ones impacting higher, one thing you could bring away from that is that it actually is a higher velocity round than what the 75 grain hollow point is. A little bit more velocity out of that same grain weight with a better expansion capability with a hollow point. I think I might actually stick with the 75 Saber Defense in it. It's going to give you more energy down range. Okay, I'm here at around 30 yards. Let's do some shooting. It sure doesn't last long, I can tell you that. But 30 yards, I make sure I don't use any kind of steel core ammunition. Yeah, a lot of fun shooting at a steel target. Okay, I'm here at around 30 yards. Let's do some shooting. And it sure doesn't last long, I can tell you that.